Founders, welcome back to the 0 to 5,000 podcast, where we obsess over the convergence of human potential and business results. Today, our hosts Drew McClure and Jordan Mitchell have another insightful conversation for you. So let's jump right in.
Okay, founders, welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm sitting down with Elizabeth Gore, the co-founder and president of Hello Alice. A multi-channel platform powered by machine learning technology, Hello Alice guides business owners by providing access to funding, networks, and services. It is the largest community of business owners in the country while tracking data and trends to increase owner success rate. Elizabeth herself previously served as entrepreneur in residence at Dell Technologies. She is the emeritus chair of the UN Global Entrepreneurs Council and previously served the UN for nearly a decade at the UN Foundation as vice president of Global Partnerships, where she founded strategic grassroots efforts like Nothing But Nets, Girl Up, and Shot at Life. Elizabeth is a former U.S. Peace Corps volunteer for which she served in Bolivia. Elizabeth has also been a leader in organizations like the Points of Light Foundation, Share Our Strength, and the Texas A&M Foundation. People magazine named her one of its top 100 extraordinary women. Fast Company called her one of the most creative people in business, and she was named one of Entrepreneur Magazine's Women to Watch. Outside of the boardroom, Elizabeth is also a world champion equestrian, a sprint triathlete, and has climbed Mount Kilimanjaro to raise awareness on behalf of the UN. Elizabeth serves on the board of the Global Entrepreneurship Network, which operates a platform of projects and programs in 180 plus countries, aimed at making it easier for anyone, anywhere to start and scale a business. Here to share her amazing story and lessons learned is Elizabeth. Elizabeth, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I always think in those bios, they should have these little here's where I failed right before that. Here's where I failed right before that.
Well, here's my question, man. Like reading this bio, I'm thinking, how many lives have you lived, right? Like, is this your third life? What is going on?
Well, I'm 45, and I love being 45. I think the 40s are a fun time because you're kind of comfortable in your own skin. You know your directions. You've made enough mistakes to learn. And so I don't know. I think every decade can be a totally new chapter in your life, which is kind of refreshing. So I like getting older because it's always a new chapter. It's better than the alternative, right?
Heck yeah, absolutely. My friends and I like talking about this, just the different stages of life and what they either can mean or do mean, right? Like sometimes it's less about what does it mean and more about what you infer meaning onto. And so as you look back, let's just start here. Like, as you look back, what were the 30s like? What were the 20s like for you as those two different decades?
Well, the early 20s I'm from Texas. I grew up on a ranch, and I was the first female in my family to go to college, and the expectation was to come back and manage the ranch. So I have a very important animal science degree in cattle.
Wow.
And then I just joke because now running a tech company, obviously that didn't that I didn't go in that direction. But I took a risk, pivoted, and moved to DC. And when I think I was 21 or 22, and that was a huge change for a Texas cowgirl, right? So
absolutely.
I think as my 20s is a time of exploration and change. And I always giggle about what were we worried about in our 20s, right? Now that we have mortgages and kids and responsibilities. And I think it's a time for people to explore. And I also took a second big jump and joined the Peace Corps. And so I think of it as I was pretty much out of the country for a decade, whether it was the Peace Corps or my service at the UN. And so I think of my 20s and then very early 30s as a time of travel, exploration, learning, and figuring things out.
Yeah. I mean, that's a hard right turn from I'm just going to go get a degree that's going to help me run the family ranch, right? Like, was there a moment that was kind of like eye-opening and I've got to go explore and that kind of thing? Or was it just something that built over time and said, hey, I think I want to do something different?
No, there's definitely some pivot moments. I got real involved. I was not a good academic, but I was a very involved student. So student government and all the activities that campus has to offer. And so I got really involved in a lot of issues on our campus, women's rights issues, student governance issues, and it really just showed me there's a lot out there. And I had the huge opportunity to go intern in DC and a couple other places, and it just opened my, I think of like the ranches, you have this fence in front of you. Are you ever going to get over that fence or not? Right. And then you get over the fence and you're like, oh, there's a town, and then there's a state, and then there's the United States, and then there's the world. Right. So I actually took that turn my senior year in college, and then I worked the front desk, believe it or not, because I worked all through college, of the George H.W. Bush School, and got to meet former President George and Barbara Bush. And they gave me the opportunity to stay and get a master's degree and then move to DC with 1,000 points of light. And so that was just, a huge opportunity, for a young person to jump and take that leap. So it's just a matter of taking the leap. And then it's a matter of going to tell your mama, who's expecting you to come back to the ranch, that I'm not coming back. I'm not going to manage it. I'm taking it. And that's still the hardest conversation I've ever had in my life.
Sure. Absolutely. Now I'll come back to that in just a second, but if we look at that time of exploration, you're literally going out into the world and you're getting to see it from some unique vantage points. DC, the home of politics, UN, Peace Corps. What do you look back on and say most got impressed on you in that time? Or like, what were the biggest lessons maybe that learned during that season?
Well, one, it's lessons learned, but also realizing how much you don't know. I think we all think we're pretty fucking smart in our 20s. And in fact, I mean, we know very little. And so I think it was a time of discovery of how much I don't know, how wrong I am about a lot, misconceptions, whether it's what you learned, what you saw, or the very narrow view you lived. The thing I did learn that has stuck with me through business now is how one person is just as smart as the next and have the resourcefulness to get things done or start their business or raise their kids or run their government, but they might have gotten just screwed by the geography they're in. And so, anytime we think we have a solution for others, sometimes or most of the time they probably have it, but they just don't have maybe the environment around them or the structure or the networks. And that was a big deal for me in the Peace Corps. It was a big deal for me when we were in countries working in the UN, that you think you are educating or giving a handout or so on, when people really have solutions. They just need to be given the foundation to make them. And now I carry that very much at Hello Us with our small business owners, is that just because a small business owner is in the middle of Oklahoma and is in Silicon Valley and they don't have all these resources around them, they can be successful and have the acumen. It's just a matter of getting them that connectivity. So that's a big thing that I remember very much stuck with me, particularly in the Peace Corps. I was in a village with 35 families who had just never had exposure to much, but the more I was there 2 years, just the more I learned how capable and amazing these folks were. So.
Yeah, I feel like in a just purely metaphorical sense, the time I started to think about that idea has been actually being a small business owner, raising a family, just like you're talking about. You value, well, hey, I bet I could figure this out and do it myself versus paying somebody $300 to come and do it, right? So there's like so many projects around the house that I've had to just YouTube how to do it. And what I found was in so many projects, the right tool, like if I didn't have a tool and all of a sudden a neighbor gave me one or I went and bought one, made everything I was trying to do so much easier.
Right.
And it's the same idea of what you're talking about. Is like often the difference between the success of that country or that person is like they just don't have that tool. They have all the capability, know-how, but like the access to the infrastructure or the technology or whatever that would assist making that job of succeeding so much easier. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think of it absolutely. I like your analogy on tools because I think of gear a lot. I love to fish. I love to hike. I love exploring, and the difference in having a good piece of gear versus not will change your entire experience, right?
Yes.
And so, yeah, I like that. That's a really cool I thought, whether it's tools or gear and who has access. Yeah, it can change everything. It's wild.
Yeah. And I'd never been a handy person, so that's why the thing hit me so hard. Was like, I'm in there trying to do it myself, feeling stupid and like, am I ever going to do it? And then somebody's like, here, use this. This thing is built to get in there and do that thing. And you do it and
Right.
you're like, well, that was easy.
Right.
You know, like,
Yeah, but how would you know, right?
exactly. Exactly. So anyways, I love that. That's so beautiful. Now what I'm curious about is how did you, or when did you transition from kind of the nonprofit
Mhm.
world that you were in to eyes on business, technology,
Mhm.
the for-profit world?
So, my latter years with the working for the United Nations Foundation, what the thing that I kept observing is when the UN would leave, which the UN should leave, that should be the goal, right? You know, whether it's health or it's good governance or whatever that is. The countries that seemed to prosper or communities or environment were those who had really strong micro business, small business, the ability to do business, whether
Yeah.
it was women even having the right to open a business, all the way over to there being a financial infrastructure to do any type of business. So I got super passionate about this whole, what we would say small business here, but in other countries probably microeconomics, and how critical it was. And we started trying to kind of shift some of the mindset at the UN about how to use innovation and technology to ensure people that can start a business in these countries. And I also got really inspired in some countries where they were leapfrogging technology, right? Like you'll never see a telephone post in a lot of countries because they went from no telephones all straight to cellular, right? There was not that middle ground. And electronic payments, straight to phones, right? Whereas we're still kind of catching up, which is interesting. So I got really passionate about this notion of how important business and small businesses with the underlying edge of you have to have technology to enable it. And so I had the great honor of working with two amazing entrepreneurs, Ted Turner and Michael Dell, while I was at the UN. Ted was
Wow.
our board chair, and then Michael was a Goodwill ambassador for entrepreneurship. And, we tested and did a lot of really cool things. We started a fund with a Skull Foundation for entrepreneurship. We started the Global Entrepreneur Council. But I really took the leap when I had the opportunity to actually move over to Dell Technologies from the UN and work with and for Michael Dell and his team. And it was during the EMC VMware acquisition, which is the largest tech acquisition in history. And Michael's passion, and still was how do we use technology as a democratizer to start and build a business. So it just kind of took what I was kind of feeling and formalized it into the space. And I'm a big believer in the importance of the UN and the nonprofit sector, but I also think there's a huge role, a critical role that the private sector plays in the strengthening of government, our economies, small business. And so it's been really fun to sit on both sides of the coin.
Absolutely. I have a little, not nearly as in depth as yours, but my 20s was basically a nonprofit, and then 30s started my own business. And so I've gotten to see a little bit of both sides, right? And my favorite thing about,
Do you like more? Do you have a side you like more?
more about the season,
Mm-hmm.
like it felt totally appropriate when I was in nonprofit and I wouldn't do it any other way. And then it felt like it was time to leave. And so it's more about like, it felt right then. And so that was right. And now this feels right, if that makes sense.
Right. Absolutely.
But I got to see the benefits. So far, I've seen the benefits and the limitations of both.
Right. Right.
Often in nonprofit, you're able to be more specific and clear on the impact you want to make, and you can just go straight for the impact. But you are really hamstringed often by resources because a lot of nonprofit is dependent on resources versus creating resources. And so that was just tough. Like whether it was the funds you needed to get the job done or the funds to pay great people to keep working there, makes it tough as my family was growing. And it's like, listen, this is really tough for me not to get paid, more than a teacher.
Well, I will tell you something funny too, because I remember thinking, gosh, I don't want to raise money anymore with nonprofit. I'm over raising money. All I do and the for-profit side is raise money. So the whole venture side, we've been through 4 rounds of capital, and I was like, I love that I had the ignorance to think that I was not going to be asking for money anymore, because that was so
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny too, because in my head, like I was like, I'm done working with people. Like it's exhausting, relationships, all that kind of stuff. Yet my business is I coach leaders.
Right,
like I'm
right,
in there in fast growing companies, coaching people, helping them wake up to things, and I'm like, I'm still doing it.
right, absolutely. Transferable
But again,
skill.
yeah, well, that's why I started thinking when I was like, I'm going to start a business. My thought was, what skill have I been honing that I could transfer into the market and exchange value for? And it was, I know how to lead people. I know how to communicate. I know how to generate self-awareness and things like that. And so what I love about business, though, is the generative aspect of it, that if done well, it generates as much as it takes.
That's
Right.
fair.
So like,
That's totally fair.
if done well, and I think that's what you're saying about other countries, the small businesses are so critical, more than just, hey, provide jobs, is a business done well creates a new value in the market.
Sure.
The fact that they just opened that shop and provided that service is now introducing generative value, and they're getting paid off of the value they created, the service or the product or whatever they created.
Right.
That's the upside that I see. Now there's plenty of downsides, obviously, to business and business done poorly and things like that. So anyways, you're not supposed to be interviewing me. I'm supposed to be interviewing you.
It's fascinating.
What's going on here? Okay. So you've had so much experience, though, working with, alongside, and also being a founder yourself. So I'm curious to hear from you. What are some of the, what are some of the lessons, some of the mistakes? Like, what's the real talk about being a founder now?
Well, just like you and I were conversating about seasons, I look at being an early founder, and I have a co-founder. So there's always been 2 of us. She's amazing, and I can't fathom doing it alone.
Same.
So, but the early years of just the 2 of us being scrappy and getting everything done and being exhausted in that way. And now, our company is over 100 folks, and we have almost 1.2 million small business owners on the platform, and it's a totally different stress and level of work and so on, right? So, and I think it's a myth to think that you can be a great leader through that entire chain, right? So Carol and I have been at this about formally 8 years, really informally 10 years. And I can think of times when I really excelled and times when it was just not my time to shine or strength. And so but when you're in it, I didn't realize it when I was in it. Now looking back, I can be like, wow, that was my skill set was good that time. Boy, it was terrible that time. Right. And I think that that is a good learning, especially for founders. When is it time to actually hire a leadership team, give up the reins on things? Or when is it time to even exit your company, right? Those are all things that I don't think when you're in it, you really think about. So there have been phases and chapters that have gone well or haven't. And then I think what I certainly didn't realize is the isolation. It's very difficult being a founder, particularly ironically, as you get bigger, when you have to, I think, kind of protect your employees, your investors, your customers from the stress, the risk, the mistakes. Not all of them. I mean, we have a very transparent company, but there are things that I shouldn't be stressing my team out on. It's my job to do that. Yeah. And so there can be, I think, a lot of isolation in that, and a lot of I've heard, a lot of folks talk about their mental health as they grow or dip in scale, particularly through COVID, obviously. So I don't know, when you're thinking of growing a business, I don't think folks think about, well, what would my mental health be like? And when am I going to be a strong leader versus something not being my strength? And I think if we could better prepare ourselves in the early months to know it's coming and who to reach out to and who can help you through that, I think we'd all be better. Absolutely.
The mental health thing is huge. And I think you mentioned one of them, which is the isolation. We bought, kind of as a joke, but we bought the domain name lonelyleaders.com because I was like, man, I may want to do something with that one day. Like I meet so many.
a dating app, or it could be a really awesome peer-to-peer mentorship app,
Exactly.
or
So
both.
we had maybe you're the person to help me do something with this. We had two different ideas. One was a joke, and it was we thought about dating. We're like, nah, there's already dating sites for all that stuff. First was you get an animal, but only for the weekend. And so the idea would be like for the weekend, like you get your puppy, same puppy every time, but then somebody takes it from Monday to Wednesday because you're so busy
Yeah.
that you
Oh
don't
my
have to worry
God.
about taking care of it. So
That's
we're like, that
amazing.
would be hilarious. And then the second was kind of a connect, like the idea was take an Inc. 5000, like small up and coming business owner and connect it to yesterday's Fortune 500 leader.
Ooh, I like that.
And
Now
like just connecting, like
that would be very
connecting
special.
connecting a seasoned leader to a new
Yeah.
leader.
Yeah.
And because that's what's been huge for me is a lot of times it was just, I had one or two people like I would call and be like, have you ever been through a season like this?
Mhm.
Hey, I have to fire my first person. Am I right for this? Like that kind of thing was just a game changer. I was like, man, I would like to connect those
Right.
kind of audiences,
Just knowing you're not crazy, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is knowing that there are actually very common cycles in business that we all go through, but no one really talks about. So if anyone listening has ever been sued yet, it will happen in your business, like as it grows. And I remember the founder of Bumble, Whitney Wolf Hurd, and Sarah Jones Simmer, her COO, we all they're way ahead of us in our business, but we grew up together in business, and they were dealing with a lawsuit. And I was like, oh my God, are you so stressed? They're like, oh, this happens, every 6 months or so. And I was like, holy crap. And then you just said laying people off or firing, right? There's no way you're not going to have to do that in your business. Cash flow issues, everybody at some point, even if it's growth or, a dip, having, upset employees, having an upset board member. And then you yourself, if your business is perfect, something is going to happen around you. Maybe you have an aging parent, or you have kids, or your co-founder is going through something that life just throws you some shit, right? And so you have to know that you're going to have dual stress in your life. And just for folks to know that and know it's okay, you can make it through, and this happens, I think is helpful to hear.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because my first thought, and I know many people's first thought, is this is happening because I'm not cut out for this,
right?
Or
I screwed up,
or I screwed up, or whatever. Instead
I wasn't prepared. Yeah.
This is the roller coaster. So like, just relax, or whatever the lesson is. Like this is par for the course, right? And that's what I want to ask. A lot of the mental weight that I see people carrying from the isolation is the pressure, is the stress, is the unknown, the desire we have to know it's going to work out, or to know that it's going to look like this. And you never get to a place where you exactly know what's going to happen next year, and all that kind of stuff. And so what have you learned about kind of taking care of that side, the pressure side, the mental side, in the ups and downs of business?
I think, Drew, right now, that is a very pertinent question. If I can set that up before I answer.
Sure.
During COVID, a lot entrepreneurs, they tend to thrive during a crisis and stress. And they tend to thrive with big opportunity and like blitz growth. I think where everyone really struggles is the unknown. And when things are in the middle or in limbo, and during COVID-19, it was like, how do we survive? I mean, it was hard as hell. Don't let me discount that. But our minds were busy. We were focused. It was like, do everything you can. Right now, I think that we are going to have a really tough time as entrepreneurs, because 2023 is so freaking weird.
Yeah.
If you look at half the economists, they say we're going to be fine, and half think we're going to die. I mean, it is literally. Yeah. And so I think what is really hard for entrepreneurs, particularly myself, I do really well in crisis. And I love big opportunities, but this whole notion of what is 23 going to be like, and how do we prepare for the unknown, I think is quite difficult. And we also, our whole company is based on OKRs and quarterlies and this and that. And how do you prepare to pivot, and budget to pivot, and budget to change, is not the way of the entrepreneur, right? That's a very corporate mentality, actually, but it's not the way of the entrepreneur. So right now, I'll just give you an example. We're going through potentially another financing round. We really are trying to figure out what our small business owners are going to need next year when it's totally unknown. And so one of the things I'm focusing on for myself and hopefully my leadership team is everyone getting themselves in fighting shape for next year. So, eat right, make sure you're spending time with your family. We're trying to practice what we're calling radical candor right now on, okay, I don't know what's going to happen. Let's just be transparent. Let's try and stay healthy physically and mentally. So you cannot control everything, but there are things that can help your mind be sharp to be in those times of of limbo. So,
Absolutely.
I think holding on, my husband the other day was like, you need to shake some steam off. You look like you're about to explode like a tea kettle. And it was like, if you can let go of that a little bit and know it's going to be kind of screwy for a while. But the only way to do that, frankly, is to, get some rest, be healthy, have some fun, enjoy, like you said, you had a great day with your buddy today. That stuff is so important. When I'm rested, I can do anything. When I'm tired, I am a mess. And so it's just, and I know all that sounds like duh, but we're terrible at entrepreneurs are terrible about this. Terrible.
Yeah. Common sense isn't common. And
right.
I had the blessing, the fortunate opportunity to speak to all of Chick-fil-A's operators as their keynote speaker for this last month.
Cool.
And the main topic was, how do you sustain success? Meaning, like, how do you not personally burn out? I'm not talking about your business,
right?
Or like you personally, because as I interviewed, and they were not alone. There's like all the founders I work with, like I can keep it up maybe another year, but like imagining 10 years from now, 20 years from now, like that seems like I would crash. Right. And so when my wife, she went to the final one, there were 6 different ones, and she was like, that was amazing. It was also very simple. I was like, I know, because the answers are actually pretty simple. Like one of the things we talked about was move your body to ground your mind. It's pretty locked up in science that, like, if I'm struggling in here, it won't solve everything, but it will ground you when you move your body, getting into your body, out of the future, out of whatever, get a heart pump going, a walk even. And it's like, man, so we just talked about the 4 pillars, like physical, emotional, mental, and soul. Like when you can understand what you need in those 4 categories, you can prepare. And the way that we talked about, which is what you're saying, is it's not when things are going well that you need it the most. You still need it, but it's actually when things are the most stressful, because it acts as a counterbalance. It's like if an athlete's in the middle of a season, they take their rest and their nutrition more seriously than they do in the off season.
Right.
Because they're like, I'm giving everything as hard as I can. So I got to sleep well. I got to eat well.
Right.
But I've noticed, at least for me and many people I've worked with, like when the pressure's on, when the work is grueling, that's often when you do the most unhealthy things, when you sleep the least, when you eat the worst, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and Drew, I think the thing that we need to do is give other entrepreneurs permission to take a step into rest. And I think the way to do that is to get into the psyche of all of us and talk about that you're going to be better at your job.
Yep.
You're going to make more money. You're going to be more productive. You're going to be a better manager if you do. So if we all need to look at this from a capitalistic standpoint, that's fine. And just think about, if you take that day or that rest, or you go to bed on time, your output will be 10 times better the next day. So if you're worried
100%.
about getting the work done or modeling good behavior, that is data driven, it's scientific, it is what it is. And
Absolutely.
I think I'd be curious, Drew, what you've heard, but there is a whole shift we're all having to make with a fully remote culture because there's no natural shut off. And so I think that also you have to figure that out for your own employees, for yourself. Like, what is the natural shut off to a day, to a week, right? I love the quote that entrepreneurs don't know what a weekend is. I think that's a funny thing. But we do have to figure that out. And for me, my children have really given me that. I can't multitask around them, or they'll take over and mutiny, right?
Yes.
And so they are my natural shut off valve. But everyone has to find what that forcing mechanism is.
Correct. Yeah, you mentioned a few things that, again, this being a conversation I'm very familiar with, I'd be happy to share. Like, one is you mentioned the guilt or there's a resistance that someone has in hearing, take care of yourself, and then applying it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually around the feeling that I'm taking resources when I should be giving resources, that
Mm-hmm.
it's selfish to invest in my health when I could be investing in my family or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. The simplest way I've done it is not through theory, is I actually did this from stage with them, was I said, take me to a day that you were your best self as a leader. Like,
Mm-hmm.
remember in the recent past, a day that you crushed it, you were productive, you were a great leader of your team. Take me to that day. And I'm like, got it in your head? 6 adjectives to describe what state you were in on that day. And then we go to a typical tough day that you not feel like you're a great leader, you didn't get a lot of stuff done. Give me 6 adjectives. And every time, the best version of themselves had a high quantity and high quality of energy. They
Mm-hmm.
felt confident, energized, inspired, excited, whatever. Tough days, they felt tired, lazy, fearful, anxious, whatever. So I said, all right, is it fair to say that person is better for everybody? The first person.
Mm-hmm.
Did your spouse like you more? Did your team like you more? Did you make better decisions? And so they're connecting the dots. And I'm like, that person was rested.
Right.
That person was
Yeah.
watered, was cared
Right.
for, right?
Right.
The other person was in survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
The other person. And so they start making the dots that, like, taking care of me so that those attributes come out
Mm-hmm.
is going to make me a better husband, wife, father, leader, all that kind of stuff. And so that's, I think, the light bulb that we have to have is,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, I am a better person to be around. I make better decisions if I have done, and it's not a lot. That's the thing is, like, when we wait too long, I always talk about, like, rehab is more expensive than prehab, right? So, like, rehab is way more expensive when you've waited till you're fully burnt out and everything in your life is on fire, or your body is, like, literally autoimmune disease shutting down, right?
Right.
It takes a lot of money and time and energy to get yourself well again.
Right.
But if you're on the prehab side of it, it's small stuff. It's like a 30-minute walk a day and 6 to 7 hours of sleep. It's not like you need 6 months off.
Right.
It's just the little things over time that prevent injury. Does that make sense?
It is. And, for those founders out there that very specifically have dual jobs, so you have a family and a company. A family can be defined as you define it. Maybe it's aging parents, kids, your partner. Sometimes you have to acknowledge that your circles are going to get real small for a while. And that's, we talked through, Drew, seasons, and we talked through chapters earlier. But if you're a person who gave back to your community and you have a big social circle and you love networking and maybe you have an amazing hobby, sometimes that is going to have to go to the wayside for a while in order for that you don't get stretched so thin. And so, my husband and I think a year ago, were like, okay, we actually really got to make our circle smaller if we're going to have a relationship with each other. We're going to be good parents, and we're both going to have these, high-powered careers. And God forbid we take care of ourselves, right? That's 4 huge pieces of the pie. And then what we didn't plan for is aging parents. So here's a 5th that's got to squeeze into an already tight pie. We can't fit anything else in there right now. And I think it's okay to say no for a while in your community, or to say no to that volunteer thing, or to be like, man, I love to fish 3 days a week. That's not going to happen for a year, right?
Yeah.
And so,
was that hard to accept?
Hell yeah, it's hard to accept. It's brutal. And I think we didn't intentionally do that. We fell into it because we were about to collapse, right? And even my husband and I's relationship will take a back seat here and there, for the kids or for the jobs. But I think the big thing about it is communicating it and being realistic with yourself, and not, again, this goes back to that guilt thing. It's like, I can't be volunteering in the food pantry and teaching Sunday school and all this right now. I just can't. And so, if anyone has a problem with that, they're not your real friend. They're not, if you're very honest, is like, I got my kids, I got my job, I got my husband right now. I'll see you in 6 months, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's acknowledging too that you're going to have tough seasons, that you're going to have to shrink that circle in order to make the pie actually bigger, ironically.
That is so huge. I mean, it also makes me think of like as founders, when you're in a tough season, you have to shrink the priorities,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Oh, big time. Yes, it totally can equate to business. Totally.
yep.
You know,
So
I
talk to me
just
about that,
shrank.
because
Yeah.
I was going to say often it's like we take complication and we make it more complicated
Mm-hmm.
by adding initiatives and adding things when typically we probably need a small, like, narrow the focus, just like you're doing with
Right.
your family and saying, hey, I got limited resources. I really need to make it count for this small circle. How do we do that in business? Do you see the same
Oh,
thing?
that's so funny, Drew, that you said that because I spent the entire morning with our leadership team on 23 planning with this. And we, 2 years ago, we made a big shift as a business. We used to help small business owners do everything they need, build their first website, hire their first employee, because these are all legitimate needs. And it was just too much, right? And so we narrowed 2 years ago to a small business's financial health. So it's all things, what's the capital you need, technical assistance, education around, it's credit, grants, all of it. And now this morning we were like, that's even a huge topic. Huge. Are we talking about taxes? Are we talking about cash flow? Are we talking about access to capital? I mean, so even today we're like, how do we even pull into, what specific piece of their financial health? And the thing that's hard about that is entrepreneurs are very opportunistic and they're also very purpose driven, right? So I see, we could do this and we could do that. And I know we could do this. So I know we could do that. Also, it's really important and they really need it, right? And I think, to say no and to pull down and focus is a real testament to leadership because it's very hard.
Yeah.
But I will tell you who values it the most is your employees because it gives them context, it gives them a clear North Star, and then your investors will love it because you're going to really shave resources towards one objective. And so I've probably been the worst at this over the years, and I'm really starting the last couple of years to see how important it is.
Yeah, there's a guy that I follow on TikTok. I don't know much about him other than seemingly his good business record. His name's Alex Hormozy. And he was talking about one of the biggest ahas he had was when he was running 5 businesses and having a hard time seeing any of them be profitable. And his new wife was like, well, what if you just made one of them really profitable?
There you
And
go.
he was like, I've never thought of that. And she was like, how easy would it be if you got rid of the other 4 and you took all your time and made this one business great? And that was the beginning of true success for him. Was
totally.
He put all of his focus into this one business and it finally got the attention it needed and the resources and it took off. And I'm like, God, man, like our instincts for some reason is usually to broaden instead of narrow. And it's usually to overcommit instead of like really commit well to a few things. I know I am shiny object syndrome, or this deserves my attention, or you feel like you're making it safer. You're like, well, if we diversify our bets,
right.
One of them will work out and a few of them won't, and that'll be safer. And it's like, am I actually making it riskier by doing that instead of like focusing all your effort on one thing?
And a good exercise, Drew, is can you really not your elevator speech, but could you really talk about the outcome of what your business does in one sentence? Not the vision, not the sales pitch, but what does it actually do?
Yeah. Is that a real question?
And well, it's not
you were
you,
asking.
Drew. I know what you do, but if that is a long explanation or even a 2-sentence explanation,
yeah,
think about it. Just sit there and think about it for a minute.
Yeah, if you're listening, do that right now, because it'll expose, again, not as like an insecurity. Oh my gosh, I don't have the answer, but as a point of emphasis that we need to get this. Because 3 years ago, I hired a sales coach to help me. My co-founder and I are great coaches. No one ever taught us though to be salespeople,
right?
Right. And so you're like, well, crap, to get clients, like I've got to be able to have these conversations with these companies and know how to have it, right? So he was saying the same thing. Hey, what do you do? What's the value you're going to give them? And I had a brilliant 5-minute speech on what we did. And he got done. And he goes, Drew, do you speak French? I was like, no. And he goes, well, you don't speak the language of results either. Oh. And I was like, I go, what does that mean? He goes, you didn't tell me what the result is that you're giving them. And I was red-faced, like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And he was like, you're thinking like a coach. You're thinking like a technical, person who knows the ins and outs of what you're doing. You're not thinking like a business, which is what's the value? What is
Right.
it ultimately we'd be paying you for? Right.
Mhm.
And that took me about a year,
Right.
literally, of
Isn't that
like,
wild how hard that is?
it took a year
Yeah.
to literally play with things. Be like, is it this? Is it this? And is this, But like you said, it has so helped me know what to say yes to and what to say no to.
Right. Right.
Just that clarity goes, nope, that's not us. Yep, that's us,
Right.
So man, I'm so curious for you as you are, let's just keep it relevant. Let's keep it to 2023. Like we're stepping into this really murky coming year
Mhm.
and we don't know what the hell's going on. And you're helping business owners. Like if we have small business owners here on the podcast listening, what would you be doing between now and January? And I know January is somewhat irrelevant, like it just represents the beginning of the year, but it's just in my mind 2 months from now. Like
Mhm.
what kind of headspace or what kind of exercise should they be, like you said, getting really
Mhm.
dialed in on their health and also on super focused on things? Like what
Mhm.
kind of things would really help them, you think?
Um, it just popped into my mind: marketing, money, and me as in the founder. Well, I'll start with money. I think it's really important to give yourself as much cushion as possible next year and diversify your cash flow. So where you can tighten down, where you can ensure maybe for the first time you get a line of credit. You've never done that before, but if you qualify, there's no downside, for example. Apply for grants, really give yourself some cushion for the unknown. The marketing piece, customer behavior is continuing to shift. I don't care what industry you're in. So being flexible and really listening and watching your customers so that your marketing can shift and pivot. And usually that would be a 6-month strategy. Right now, I think it needs to be a monthly and really thinking about, and the best way to do that is to talk to your customers. Again, back to simplicity is, if you're brick and mortar, how are people shopping? Are they walking in? Are they looking online before they come in? Is it, I love the fact that TikTok now is in the top 5 ways small businesses sell their goods. I mean, who would have thought of that a year ago, right? So
Right.
what are you, from a marketing standpoint, being prepared for that flexibility, right? And then on the founder themselves is, again, get yourself in fighting shape to constantly pivot mentally, physically, and with your budget and your team next year. And that does mean taking a little breath, maybe between Christmas and New Year's, getting yourself set. And also not having a fail forward mentality so much, but having a mentality that there's no sacred cows. Like if you had a plan for Q1 and it shifts, that is okay. Right. So those are the 3 areas I think folks should really be thinking about for 23.
That is, by the way that your mind just went and got those 3 M's, that is brilliant. I love that. Money, marketing, and me. I'm going to remember that. On the idea of the mindset, and if you think of anything else that's been a particularly helpful mindset for you in terms of resilience or innovation or whatever, I'd love to hear it. But that one in particular, the no sacred cows, is tough. I don't know if it's personality driven or what, but like I get my heartstrings attached to ideas. And if it doesn't work, it's easy for me to go, oh, how I failed. What's wrong with me? And it can be counterproductive to just pivoting and going, oh, we tried it, didn't work, or Q1 didn't go the way we thought. Like, now what do we do? Right.
Yeah. Drew, on that note, I don't know if you're ever around scientists. I formerly was not, but now I'm in YPO, and in my group, I have 2 scientists, and I admire them so much because the whole notion of experimentation and hypotheses in science is that you see what breaks and what doesn't, and then pull the best idea out of that. This woman who creates protein out of air had a whole thing not work 1 week, and then we saw her a month later, and she created this whole new business line out of it, of basically what broke. And so having that, I just admire scientists because I don't think we kind of on the business entrepreneurship side really think that way. So maybe going in with a science mentality might be maybe a way to think of it, that everything is a experiment and a hypothesis for right now.
Yeah, that's so well said. The data approach, the hypothesis theory approach, I know is the healthy thing. I'm learning to wrap my mind around it because I'm more of a creative.
It's
Like
hard, though.
I'm more of
It's
the
hard.
heart, relational, I create
Yeah.
ideas, and so, but I can see it intellectually. It makes so much sense. Like, hey, it is just a theory. Go out and put it in the market, test it, get data, react to it, and keep it unemotional. And so I'm working on it. That's my thing. I'm working on it, but I'm not there yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think having your heart and your purpose in it, but not your emotions in it, right? I do think that's two different things. And I think it's okay to have your whole heart and mind and you care deeply. But when it kind of crosses over to the emotionality of it, that's when I think we can get in a little bit of trouble. And I do it all the time, by the way. So I'm not saying I'm good at it, but I recognize it's a problem.
Yeah. We'll end with this. Have there been any other mindsets you've found just to be particularly useful?
Well,
a way of seeing the world, a way of seeing business.
Two things that just come up over and over the last year or two have been, there are times when I have been so wrong and the outcomes have been awesome. And personally and professionally. And so sometimes being wrong could be God's greatest gift. And then a second one is I've always been you have to make it happen, full results oriented. We're going to get the sale, the deal, the partnership, the investor. And when those haven't happened, also there's this huge sense of like, my God, thank God, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so, yeah, I think those are similar, but it's certainly something that I'm like thinking and pondering on and, kind of having gratitude towards.
You'll probably remember this as a country girl. I grew up in the South as well, but it makes me think, is it Garth Brooks maybe, but is the song, Thank God for Unanswered Prayers.
Yeah, that's Garth Brooks. Yeah, it's a great song. And it's exactly correct. It is exactly correct.
There's these things that you're like, I know this is best and this is the right move. And then when it doesn't happen, you're like, that wasn't the right move. Thank God that didn't happen or we didn't get that deal.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. And I think maybe that gives us all a little bit of grace that if you think you're failing or you think you weren't prepared or everything, just turn the corner, just go around the next corner and just see what that result is. So there might be a massive opportunity on the other side of it.
Awesome. Now for the people listening that could use your services, where do we send them and for what? As you're narrowing your focus, who do we need to send your way to check out what you have at Hello Alice?
So any business owner, whether you've started or you've been in business 20 years, helloalice.com. We are here to help you with your financial health. And also with you. We love our small business owners. We call them owners. Our community are fiercely loyal to each other. So we have the largest Black-owned business center, the military spouse center. You can actually join things that I think are really about you personally.
Yeah.
But we also know that if you have financial health, you're going to feel a hell of a lot better. So we'll help you with grants, credit, loans. But we really focus on equity. So equitable access is the heart of what we do, ensuring women, people of color, U.S. veterans, everyone gets the same shot.
Wow.
So
amazing.
We'd love to have you.
Hey, well, I'm a business owner and I'm going to be checking out your services.
Thanks, Drew.
If you're listening, please go check it out. Like she said, nothing more important, especially to the longevity of your business, than feeling like you have your financial health. So hello, Alice. Elizabeth.
It's okay.
Well, hold on. Before we go, where did Alice come from? Where did the name Hello Alice come from?
Oh my gosh. If you read the original Lewis and Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, we really akin that whole story to the journey of an entrepreneur. So she's chasing the white rabbit, which we say is always cash flow. She's always out of time. She's having to open and close doors. So we just really loved the story.
I freaking love that. I'm a huge fan of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey and the idea of these archetypal stories and the meaning that we can get from them. So that's so cool. Awesome. Elizabeth, thank you. We
always say welcome to Wonderland when you start a business.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been
Thanks, Drew. It was
truly
such a pleasure.
Awesome.